So I went to the Clermont Democrat meeting on June 26th because JD Gallagher, the head of the Clermont Young Democrats, invited me. I was not treated well. I think he was embarrassed by it. And then he invited me to come to the Clermont Young Democrats meeting on Friday, the 27th, which I did. And I was again not treated well. So I do think that JD Gallagher is sincere in wanting to have a dialogue on policy matters. But I think that, there's lots of obstacles to that happening for him. So I actually started writing him a note about the experience of coming to his Young Democrat meeting, and I'm going to send this to him. I need to fine tune a little. I'm not really done, but I also want to talk about it. So I went to the meeting. It was at 7:30 on Friday. I actually changed my schedule to go to the meeting, because I really think engagement is a good thing. So what they did in the meeting was they did kind of introductions at the beginning. There were about, 9 people there, 9 young people, 9, 10 young people, and then maybe so many old people, like, half a dozen older people there. I was one of the older people. So they did kind of introductions. I thought that there was going to be some sort of policy discussion at the meeting, but apparently I was misinformed or misunderstood. They did sort of this 3-minute introduction thing. And mainly it was the old people doing it. And the first one was about how they couldn't quit crying since the election. What's so funny is the inconsistency of, we want democracy, but we're crying and having a breakdown because of the hate-filled people that voted for somebody we don't want them to vote for in democracy. So it's very inconsistent. And I've been disappointed in a lot of elections, but I've never been angry, like where I couldn't function. I just think that's a very unproductive place to be. But anyway, we went down the line and eventually got to me doing an introduction. And before I get into what I said, there was a mention, and I've heard this JD Gallagher say this twice, about a safe space. This is a safe space, okay? And I hate this safe space nomenclature, but if you want to get involved in politics, okay, politics is about debate, discussion, argument, dare I say, fighting for your beliefs in a non-physical way. And that's not a safe space. And frankly, more of our young people need less safe spaces and to be exposed to a back and forth, a discussion, a debate, and to realize that in our system, the blessing of our system is that if we learn how to do that kind of debate and discussion in a professional manner, we get to better solutions. And so when we talk about a safe space, I'm sorry, if you want a safe space and that's incompatible with real politics, maybe it's compatible with some sort of dictatorship or something, but a safe space, it should be about discussion and debate. And I hope that JD gets that, but I've heard him say a couple times about, this is a safe space. I'm sorry, but politics is inconsistent with a safe space. And if your delicate constitution can't take back and forth, can't take debate, can't take conflict of ideas, then you don't belong in politics. And that's true, by the way, that's true on the Republican or conservative side as well as the liberal Democrat side. It's a contact sport. Politics is a contact sport. And that's, by the way, that's what, if you're into it, that's what makes it fun, by the way. Debating, discussing, arguing. If you're not, most people aren't into that, and I get it. But if you want to be in politics, that's what it is, okay? Is a debate, a discussion, a conflict of ideas. It's not about a safe space. That's a kind of a ridiculous notion. So I remind people, if I could have in the meeting, I would have reminded them that our system is a deliberative system where we argue, debate. We don't even have to agree after we've come to a decision. We can continue to think, say, like Obamacare was wrong, even though when it's in place. That is what our system is. That's different than a consensus system like Asia or a dictatorial system where there isn't any debate. Once a decision's made, it's made, and that's what it is. And so when you talk about a safe space or people being afraid of debate and discussion, that is inconsistent with American politics. And that is, frankly, if JD watches this, that's inconsistent, JD, with the idea that you want to talk about policy and debate policy. That is not. So I found at the beginning of the meeting, and it's funny, these people like talking about the democracy and hate-filled, and they were pretty much hate-filled. The person going on about how they couldn't function because Trump got elected. I'm sorry, if you believe in democracy, you believe in democracy. If you don't, and I could tell you when Biden got elected, do I think there were shenanigans? Absolutely, absolutely. But was I unable to function? Was I having a mental breakdown because Biden? No. No, it's politics, okay? Your job is to keep moving forward and keep figuring out ways that can be productive and can be positive and can get to better solutions and can win people over. So I don't feel it was, the meeting kind of started out on a down note for me because the first introduction was somebody about how they couldn't function because Donald Trump got elected. Okay, so when it got to me introducing myself, I tried to come in, I get it. Like, you don't come into a meeting and then tell everybody, hey, I'm super ultra mega, and like, F you all. No, I came in and I started by mentioning that, I'm Chris Hicks. I'm all about getting rid of cronyism and corruption in our local politics. We should all agree on that. And I'm all about good process because I feel like when you have good, clean process, good, clean debate and discussion, you're going to get to better decisions. And I'm willing to take the risk that every now and then there's going to be a bad decision out of that because what my experience is with a good process, you get good or better decisions. So when I did my introduction, I started out with that. And then I gave an example because, if anybody pays attention to me knows I'm very critical of establishment Republican culture and mentality. And so I brought up, kind of like the uniparty theme of like, we get distracted on shiny object issues. And I said guns, identity, whatever, okay? And I'm not against, we can debate those issues. I'm not saying don't debate those issues. But my point was we get distracted and we miss the point. So for example, I said I don't know how you guys feel. I mean, this was towards the beginning of the meeting, so they hadn't said anything. And I'm like, but I said, look at student loan forgiveness, okay? Regardless of how you feel about student loan forgiveness, isn't there a substantial issue in our system that we have an education system at the higher level that leaves young people, that's unaffordable, leaves young people saddled in unbelievable amounts of debt for degrees for which they can't get jobs because it's not something that people want to pay people for. And they're left, not able to pay off their debts even. So regardless of how you feel about student loan forgiveness, isn't it indicative or emblematic of that there's a problem in our higher education world that we ever get to the point that we need student loan forgiveness? And that was the point I was trying to make. And I thought that would be a conciliatory point. Well, there was some woman in front of me. I don't know. I didn't write down her name, but I guess she was some Dem leadership, older person. And she was having none of that. So there was one young person, a girl that wanted, to move the meeting along. She was very unproductive, okay, and to having a good discussion in a meeting. But I found that older people were the real issue, other than that one young person. So this older person kind of sitting right in front of me, she starts interrupting me. She was trying to take a picture of me when I had been told no pictures are allowed, and then I had to bring up, hey, no pictures are allowed. And then it's clear that she didn't want there to be a discussion about the failure of our educational system that would ever lead to a discussion about student loan forgiveness. So my point was, before we talk about student loan forgiveness, let's talk about how we have a system, where I went to college, it was like $5,000 or $6,000 for a whole year at Miami. And now it's unaffordable. You get saddled with debt. You come out with a degree that you can't get a job, And she wanted none of that. And that made me really think after the meeting that this is what pandering is. This is what she had given a little introduction of, and it was all glad-handing how wonderful these young people were, speaking up, going to protest, stuff like this. And I think they're being played. I think they're being played because that's a distraction from the real issue. The real issue is, higher education. Now, maybe then they would have a discussion, it should be free. And I'm like, okay, well, if that would have happened, I would have been, okay, even if it's free, but you still come out with a degree where you can't earn any money, you just wait, what's the point? And, so my point is, it doesn't need to be free if what you learn is valuable and you can, support yourself afterwards. So that was kind of what happened when I did that introduction. Well, the lady was all over me, interrupting me, obnoxious to me, and I think she was a Dem leader. I don't know if she would have been there otherwise, but she was there she definitely was all over me, trying to take a picture of me. Another obnoxious person. And so I left. And then one of them started yelping at me, and then I heard them all yelling and shit when I left. But it's like, this is just a joke. I want to tell you, young people on either side, don't let older people play you into shiny object shit. Get you all focused on, let me give you an example, identity stuff. So there are two of them when they were doing their introductions of the young people said something about identity type issues. Well, put that aside for a second. Let's just put that aside. a country in which the taxes are unaffordable, you can't get a job, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't matter what your identity is, okay? And so my point is, I like Russell Brand's saying that we have more in common with each other than any of us do with our leaders. But that also involves needing to discern that we're not being distracted by shiny object issues that are not really the big issue. And so the big issue, to me, if you're a young person, is it doesn't matter what your identity is. Let's put that aside. Taxes, education, job opportunity, those are the issues, okay? And because no matter your identity, if you can't get a job, you can't do this, you can't do that, then you are, I think, going to be stuck in life. You're going to be in a place where you're held down by a system. And I just as a recollection, Jen Mezzachelli, if I said it right, was there. And she made some comment about me having interviewed her and that I agreed with her about government not providing for people. And I later, when I did my introduction, I mentioned, no, that's not what I said. What I said, I'm not for this idea that government provides for people. My idea is government solves problems, okay? Government solves problems. And both sides, whatever your identity, whatever the thing is, a lot of times today the government's not solving our problems. I mean, from that there's, whether you're liberal or conservative, you should be upset about being sold out for your jobs, being in forever wars, being, too high of taxes, an education system that I don't care what year is not producing results that's competitive on the world stage, or even intellectually from a intellect standpoint, putting us at the lead of the pack of the world going forward. So that was what happened. I left. Okay, JD sent me a couple texts again apologizing to me. I think JD Gallagher is sincere. I've been very sincere in accepting invitations. That's the kind of guy that I am. I'm not going to walk in there and just immediately throw a grenade, and that's not my point. It's like I'll look for some way that we can communicate and talk. But when some older Democrat woman's going to attack me for, basically I think raising an issue that might break through on some of these young people to realize that the issue is not student loan forgiveness. That's a shiny object. The issue is an education system that's not helping you young people and is leaving you in a bad situation. So that's what happened at the Democrat meeting. I didn't really, I accepted their parameters of no pictures, and I just left and came home. Frankly, I guess I'm okay with that. I went. I could have been doing something else. I actually had an invite to do something else that would have been way more fun. But hopefully there'll be a basis in some of this, that some of these, people get out of the way, and maybe some of the young people and older people of goodwill could help facilitate that the JD Gallaghers of the world, that there actually could be the discussions on policy, and there could be discussions on things that directly affect Clermont County people, and like the things that matter, like jobs. I'm telling you, like, we don't have such a utopia of jobs, opportunity, and education that we have the luxury of focusing on nit issues. There's a lot of core issues that we can focus on to make our county, our state, and our nation better. But I accepted the invitation. I went there. That's a rundown of what happened.